Republican.
I ask consent that further proceedings on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I rise to make some observations about the Keystone Pipeline. President Obama has said his first priority is jobs. Well, here's an opportunity for the President to show it. A pipeline provision that, according to some estimates, would create thousands of jobs right away. In fact, those are all the estimates I've seen, that this is a project that is ready to go. Here's an opportunity for the President to say he's not going to let a few radical environmentalists stand in the way of a project that will create thousands of jobs and make America more secure at the same time. The labor unions support the pipeline. The Chamber of Commerce supports the pipeline. Out-of-work Americans support it. And a growing number of Democrats are expressing their support as well. Here are a few of the comments we've heard from Democrats just this very week. Senator Kent Conrad of North Dakota said, quote, "I personally think the pipeline is absolutely in the national interest. It'll help us reduce our dependence on foreign energy, at least foreign sources that are hostile to our interests." Senator Conrad further said, "I, for one, on this side, would hope that this could be part of a final package, and I hope that this is something we could work through in the coming hours." Senator McCaskill, if states' rights are being protected and if this is going to be something maybe that we can try to jumpstart the approval process, make it go more quickly. Representative Clyburn, one of the leaders of the Democratic conference in the House, "I'm very much for the pipeline. There's no question about that," Congressman Clyburn said. Congress should do something not just to assist people who are struggling in a down economy or out of work, but to help incentivize job creation for our people at the same time. In other words, let's not just pass a bill that helps people on the benefit side. Let's also include something that actually helps the private sector create the jobs Americans need for the long term. This is the balanced approach Americans want, one that extends help but also offers hope. This is just the kind of thing we should be doing around here. Both parties like it. The labor unions like it. Why in the world wouldn't we want to put it in the package? The only reason the White House has given for opposing the pipeline provision is they'd rather vote on it alone, which makes absolutely no sense. You're either for the provision or you're not. So I would suggest that there's a rare opportunity to do something truly positive together on a bipartisan basis at the end of the year. Let's finish this year on a truly cooperative bipartisan note. Let's strengthen our nation's energy security, decrease the energy we import from overseas, create American jobs right now, and let's do it all on a bipartisan basis. As I said, there's bipartisan support for this project. We need to get it done. We need to get it done now. The House of Representatives have been quite clear that they're not going to support a package that does not include the pipeline. Frankly, I will not be able to support a package that doesn't include the pipeline. I think this is something we could all be proud of here at the end of the year, demonstrating to the American people that we can work together not only to help those who are struggling through a continuation of the payroll tax holiday and an unemployment benefits package, but also create jobs at the same time in the private sector without a penny of the federal government's money by moving this pipeline along. After all, it's undergone 3 years of environmental studies. It's ready to go. The companies are ready to hire the people just as soon as we give them the sign-off. So, Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President,
Senator from Florida.
I ask for unanimous consent that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that I be recognized to speak in morning business for up to 15 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to thank those who have listened to our emails that we just sent out back in Florida, alerting them that they'll be speaking here on the floor. It may be the last time I speak for this year. I wanted to take a few minutes today to kind of update everyone on what this first year in the Senate's been like. And first of all, it's been a tremendous privilege and an honor. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't come here to this building early in the morning when I can get to the gym. I probably should do that more than I do, but then and see this building lit up in the darkness, and just takes my breath away that I actually get to work here on behalf of the people of the state of Florida. I recognize what an honor and a privilege it is to have this position, not just in this unique institution, which is different than perhaps any legislative body in all of human history, but this republic that really stands out in the history of mankind. I think as Americans we should always take a moment to recognize that in America, on this floor, we debate and sometimes solve issues that other countries fight wars with each other about. And that's a real blessing that we have and a real opportunity to really be an example for the world. And I'm grateful and feel blessed to be a part of it. And I want to thank the people of Florida for the opportunity to do it. I want to share two observations as this year comes to an end, and hopefully today or tomorrow or sometime this weekend we'll wrap up our work here in this body for 2011. Observations that I have after my first year here. I think I'm 3 weeks away from having sworn in for the first time. And so there's a couple things that concern me. The first is this real lack of urgency. There are some major issues confronting America, and these have to be confronted. We need to look no further than to Europe to see what our future holds, unfortunately, if some of the issues that now face us are not confronted. That's not hyperbole and it's not partisanship. It's reality. It's math. This country borrows more money than it needs to, or should. This is a country that's now spending more money than it takes in at an alarming pace, and there's no plan in place to prevent that. And that's not a partisan observation. That's not a Republican concern or a Democrat concern. That's the concern of every person who's grounded in reality, that we cannot continue doing what we are doing now. And there are specific things that are in trouble that we should be very concerned about. Medicare is one example. You know, I have a very special place in my heart for Medicare. Number one, there are a lot of people in Florida that are on Medicare. And number two, in my own life, both in my father's illness last year before he passed away and this year where my mother has suffered some setbacks in her health, I've seen firsthand how important Medicare is. And there are two things that worry me about Medicare. The first is that it won't be there when my generation and future Americans retire, and the other, just as important, is that somehow, because we fail to act in a timely manner, people like my mother that are currently on Medicare may some point in their lifetime see their benefits change dramatically or see the program and quality of access decline. And so I think we need to do everything we can to save Medicare. And we know for a fact, and no one can dispute, that if we leave Medicare the way it is right now, that program is going to be in a lot of trouble. And I hope there's a sense of urgency about that, about the fact that our economy is now smaller than our debt. $15 trillion. That's a lot of money that we owe, that our children and our grandchildren will owe. That's a lot of money. That's a big deal. National security threats that we face, which are significant and have to be confronted. So almost the sense that somehow the major issues can wait until another election or another moment concern me, because these issues have a tendency to sneak up on you, and a problem becomes a crisis. And it's a lot harder to solve a crisis than it is to solve a problem. And so I hope we have a sense of urgency with regards to these issues in the coming year. There's another thing I'd like to talk about, which is a troubling emergence in the last year in the politics, and it's really this rhetoric that, in my opinion, seeks to divide Americans against each other, basically pits Americans against each other. The way the rhetoric basically goes is that the reason there are Americans that are struggling, they're hurting. People that have lost their jobs, people that are working twice as hard and making half as much, people that have lost their homes, people that have graduated from college and can't find a job. And there's this theme out there by some, including, quite frankly, many in our political leadership, and from time to time even the White House, that is saying to people, the reason why you are doing worse off is because there's a handful of people out there that are doing too well. That the reason why you've lost your job is because someone else is being too greedy. That the reason why, you're losing your home is because someone else owns too many homes. That the reason why you're making less money is because someone else is making too much money. And I'm troubled by that rhetoric that pits people against each other. Because the second part of that argument, by the way, is give the government more power. Give us government more power so we can step in and right this wrong. So we can take away from the people that have too much and give to those people that do not have enough. And let me tell you why I'm troubled by that. The first reason why I'm troubled by that is because it is absolutely not the kind of country we have been for 220-some-odd years. It's not in our nature. Americans have never been a people that drive through a nice neighborhood and say, oh, I hate the people that live in these nice houses. Americans have been a people that drive through a nice neighborhood and say, congratulations on your nice house. Guess what? We will be joining you soon. We've never been people that go around and confront people that have been financially, or look at people that have been financially successful and say, we hate you, we envy you because of how well you're doing. Americans have celebrated their success and say, guess what? We're going to be successful soon as well. I remember growing up, and I always tell people I'm a child of privilege because I have the privilege and the honor of being born in the greatest country in human history and of having a mother and a father that were married, loved each other, and lived in our home, and these are two of the most important things anyone could have. But my parents were working-class folks. My dad was a bartender for most of his life. My mom was a maid and a cashier and a stock clerk at Kmart. We were not people of financial means. In terms of significant financial means, I always tell, look, I always had what I needed. I didn't always have what I wanted, but I always had what I needed. My parents always provided that. I don't ever remember them telling us or teaching us that the only way we could be more successful is if other people were less successful. They never inculcated in us the belief that somehow, in order for us to climb the ladder, other people had to come down from the ladder. On the contrary, what they would do is hold up these examples of success and inspire in us the hope that one day we could be there as well, financially, in our career, what have you. We are a people that have always celebrated other people's success so long as we always had the opportunity to meet that success ourselves. That is the American nature. That is the American character. That is one of the things that makes us different from the rest of the world. And I'm afraid we could lose that, or are on the verge of losing that, and I'm really concerned that there are those in America's political leadership that are advocating that we abandon that in favor of something else. And I think it's wrong because it doesn't work. That thought process, that somehow other people have to be worse off in order for you to be better off, does not work. People get on boats. People jump fences to get away from that kind of thought process. People flee countries that do that because it doesn't work. It never has. It never has. And it will not work here. And the proof is in the numbers. Let's put aside partisan political rhetoric for a moment and look at the numbers. In January of 2009, when the president was sworn in, he inherited a very bad economy. He inherited a bad economy. He inherited an economy, for example, that had 12 million people out of a job. An economy where gas was $1.85 a gallon, where the debt was at $10.6 trillion, where there were 39 million Americans living in poverty in January of 2009. He inherited a bad economy. But for the first 2 years of his presidency, he had for at least one of the first 2 years, he had 60 votes here in the Senate, which I quickly learned is the way everything seems to happen around here, by 60 votes. He had a majority in the House. He could have anything he wanted. And he said, this is what I want. This is what the president said. He wanted a stimulus package, and he got it. He wanted his health care package, and he got it. He wanted financial services reform, and he got it. So what happened? Let's look at the numbers. Became president, bad economy, got everything he wanted. What's happened since? Well, now there are 13.3 million people unemployed. Gas is now at $3.27 a gallon on average. The debt is now up to $15 trillion. And people in poverty, 39 million when he took office, 46 million people now. So put aside the partisan rhetoric for a moment, just the numbers. Became president, got everything he wanted, and everything got worse. Those are the facts. Now, is this because he's a bad person? Of course not. It's ridiculous. It's because his view of government and politics is wrong. And those who share it are wrong. They're not un-American. They're not bad people. But the proof is it doesn't work. It hasn't worked anywhere else in the world to approach it this way, and it isn't going to work here. It isn't going to work here. So I hope in this new year we'll reverse course on these things and instead embrace and take up the things that do work in America. What makes America become more prosperous? It isn't that complicated, guys. It isn't Fortune 500 companies. It isn't big corporations. Every country in the world has rich people. Every country in the world has billionaires and millionaires. What makes us different is that here, a worker can become an owner. An employee can become an employer. Literally, it happens all the time. You can't walk but 2 blocks anywhere in this country and not bump into somebody that didn't start a business out of the spare bedroom of their home, that didn't take their credit card or their life savings and risked it all behind a great idea. And today, 20 people work for them. That's 20 families being fed. 20 families sending kids to college because somebody had the audacity to take their life savings in pursuit of their dream. And so they opened a business out of the spare bedroom of their home. They opened a business out of a corner in their garage. Nowadays, sometimes with a laptop and an empty table at a Starbucks. And it worked. And we've got to get back to that. And what stands in the way of that are three things above everything else. The first is a tax code that's crazy. It's not complicated. It's not burdensome. It's crazy. This is the craziest thing you've ever seen in your life. First of all, it's full of loopholes and exemptions that have been built in. And you know who helps? That doesn't help the big guys. It doesn't hurt billionaires and you know, millionaires and big corporations. These guys can handle this stuff. They may not like it, but they can hire lawyers and accountants and lobbyists. They can figure this stuff out. You know who a complicated tax code kills? The guy or the gal trying to start a business out of their spare bedroom or their home. So we've got to simplify our tax code. It has to be reformed. If there's stuff in there that's the result of good lobbying instead of good policy, take it out. I hope we'll work on that. Everybody here says they're for tax reform. Let's do it. Let's have some urgency. Let's have some urgency behind that. The second is regulations. Look, we need to have regulations. There's a glass of water. I don't want this thing to have poison in it. I want our air to be clean. We all want things, and government has a role to play in those things. But let me tell you what happens when regulations go too far. When they seem to exist only for the purpose of justifying the existence of a regulator, you don't hurt the guys that have made it. You don't hurt the big corporations or the billionaires. These guys can hire lawyers to deal with all that stuff, and they can hire lobbyists to come here and change all that stuff. It kills the people trying to start a business out of the spare bedroom of their home. And last but not least, so we've got to simplify the regulatory system we have in this country as well. And finally, this debt. The debt is a problem because there's no plan in place to do anything about it. And people are afraid, they are concerned, they are worried, and rightfully so, about investing money in an economy that doesn't have a plan to pay its bills. And so I hope we'll reverse course on all those things, because if we do, it'll lead to prosperity. And let me tell you what prosperity will lead to. It will lead to more jobs. More jobs will lead to more taxpayers. More taxpayers will lead to more revenue. And more revenue means we will have money to pay down our debt and do the things that government should do, like our national defense, like invest in infrastructure and in our people, like provide a safety net to help those who cannot help themselves. But to do that, it all starts with embracing the fundamental principle of America's prosperity. And that is that we have never been a nation of haves and have-nots. We are a nation of haves and soon-to-haves, of people who have made it and people who will make it. And that's who we need to remain if we desire to provide our children what we had in the American century, which is what the 21st century can be, should be, and will be, if in 2012 this body and our leadership reverses course from the direction we are headed and places us on a path that's true to our heritage as a people and embraces for our children and grandchildren the future they deserve. A prosperous and growing America where all things are possible, where anyone from anywhere can accomplish anything, where the son of a bartender and a maid can be a U.S. senator, and where anyone watching, no matter where you start out in life, can accomplish and be anything you want to accomplish if you're willing to work hard, play by the rules, and have the ability to do it. And so with that, I want to wish all my colleagues and the people of Florida and the people of the United States a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, a Happy New Year. May God always bless our country, and may 2012 bring us the safety and prosperity for our nation and for the world. Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Mr. Alexander.
the opportunity, while the floor is relatively quiet, to come and explain one of the votes that we're going to be asked to cast tomorrow. And in fact, it's very timely that I'm here on the Senate floor at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because the House, I understand, just passed House Resolution or House Concurrent Resolution 94, and I'm going to ask the Senate to reject that resolution when it comes here tomorrow for our vote. And I'm asking Democrats and Republicans to join with me in voting no on that resolution, and I'd like to take a few minutes to explain why. I think pictures are worth 1,000 words, so let me just use 4 to save time. This is about disasters in 2011. This whole issue is about how we should budget for disasters, and it's an important debate that has been one of the many debates that Congress has had over this last year, and we're wrapping up that debate in the next 48 hours. So this is a part of that debate, and I think pictures speak louder than words. This is a picture of Joplin, Missouri, a town that was virtually wrecked by a massive and monster tornado and tornadoes. This is a picture of the Mississippi River flooding in Cairo, Illinois. The Mississippi River this year was at one of its highest levels in some places in over a century, and we received our own share of that flooding in Louisiana, which sits at the base of this great Mississippi River basin. So our people, as well as people along the entire Mississippi River Valley, experienced unprecedented flooding. The lonely couple and distraught couple sitting, looking like in the middle of an ocean, is actually Nags Head, North Carolina. This is what happened to their beach home as water virtually surrounded them and destroyed that community again this year with Hurricane Irene. And down here on the far right is a picture of the fires that raged and devastated through Texas, that experienced one of the worst droughts in the recorded history of Texas. And I could show, Mr. President, the sad thing about this debate is I could show picture after picture after picture of communities in our country devastated by tornadoes, fires, hurricanes, disasters that strike without warning, whose impacts are virtually impossible to measure until months afterwards because of the extraordinary damage. In fact, the Weather Service just this month did a recalculation of 2011 and declared it to be one of the worst disaster years since records have been kept, saying that they had now concluded, and enough evidence had come in, that we had over 12 disasters in one year, in this year of 2011, over $1 billion each. So this year was a real outlier. But sadly, Mr. President, and you have heard this in your state, we have heard it in my state of Louisiana, we have heard it around the world, that unfortunately these pictures may not be an aberration, that these pictures may show what is to come, that these disasters, while 2011 was a very bad year, people are starting to think, with the changes in temperature and climate change, for whatever people think the reasons are for that, no one should disagree with the consequences of changing temperature, which are violent weather episodes. So the question, Mr. President, is what are we going to do about it, and what is the right way to move forward? Let me show you what the wrong way is before I explain the right way. This is the wrong way to respond, and this has been suggested by some of my Republican colleagues. They suggest that when the water rises on your home, or when the tornado rips you out of your bed and the roof falls on you and your family, or when the river water rises and you look out of your second floor window over your 100 or 200 acre farm and you can't see anything and your cows are swimming and your horses are swimming as well, that what you should do is climb on your roof, call Washington, call the hotline, and identify the offset in the federal budget to provide the cost of your rescue. I mean, it is laughable. It's supposed to be funny. It is a funny cartoon, but when you think about it, it's really not funny to tell the American people that in order to be rescued, you need to call the budget office of the federal government, identify an offset, and then we will send a rescue to you and to respond to your emergency. It's not funny, and the American people aren't laughing. And so I'm going to ask my colleagues to vote no on H.R. 94 tomorrow, because that is exactly what H.R. 94 does. I should get a big pen and write, if you think that Grandma here with the cat and the phone is what you want your constituents to look like, then you just go right on and vote for H.R. 94. But I'm not going to vote for that concurrent resolution because our leaders wisely, both Republican and Democratic leaders, wisely, in August, in anticipation of this issue, already provided for disaster funding in the Budget Control Act, already provided for it. We don't have to tell our constituents that before we can send money to help you in Joplin or to Nags Head, North Carolina, or to Cairo, Illinois, or to San Antonio or Dallas, Texas for your fires, that you have to identify an offset, because we wisely said within the Budget Control Act, within our efforts to close the budget gap, we're providing for disaster funding. And that's what we have done. But some members of the House will continue to want to adhere to trying to identify an offset before disasters can be responded to. They say things like, we should pay for disasters in the year that we respond to them. I'm going to present a chart in just a minute when it comes, but I want to try to explain this, the second reason why this is a faulty way forward, is that in 2005, which wasn't that many years ago, the federal government allocated $45 billion. Actually, I think this number is about $68 billion, and I'm going to show the chart in a minute, in 1 year. And that year was the year of Katrina, and Rita, which were the #1 and #3 most violent and disastrous and costly hurricanes in the history of our country. They happened in the same year to the same state or to the same area, which was Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. You know, we got the brunt of two of the worst storms that literally flooded a metropolitan area or flooding an area greater than the size of Great Britain, and that amount, Mr. President, was $68 billion. If we followed the poor logic of some on the Republican side that we had to pay for this disaster in that year and the budget, I think we would have probably had to eliminate half of the discretionary budget of the United States of America. And I'm going to get that exact number. But it's ludicrous to think that you would be able to find $68 billion in the budget in that 1 year. In fact, the whole Homeland Security budget, it wouldn't be half, the whole Homeland Security budget is $42 billion. So let me repeat, instead of half of the federal budget, we would have had to completely eliminate the entire Homeland Security budget of the United States of America, plus another couple of smaller budgets to meet the $68 billion requirement. It just doesn't make any sense. And it's not right. It's not the right way to budget. It violates the Budget Control Act. And it is so hypocritical that some on the other side are requiring this for domestic expenses when they don't require the same thing for foreign expenses or international expenses. And I'd like to put up this next chart. I mean, to pour salt on the wound here, and I quite don't understand this politics. I don't understand the math. I don't understand the budgetary consequences, and I don't understand the politics. Wrong on all three counts, because this is what those that voted for H.R. 95 have to go home and explain to their constituents. They're going to have to go home and say, when I was in Congress, I allocated $823 billion for the war in Iraq and required no pay for. And then I went back to Congress and spent $557 billion in Afghanistan and didn't say a word about that. And then I went back and added a Medicare drug benefit for $180 billion, and we didn't pay for that. And then I went back and sent checks to everyone when George Bush was the president. Those checks cost $124 billion, and we didn't require any offset or budget implication for that. But when Americans who had their homes destroyed, their farms flooded, their businesses ruined by disasters, I can't send a dime unless we take it out of health, transportation, or education. So they said no to this little $8.1 billion after spending a grand total of $1.68 trillion on all of these items. So I don't understand the math. I don't understand their ramifications to the budget. And I most certainly don't understand this politics. And I don't agree with it. Because I think the American people should come first. Their needs for disasters should come first. And we cannot possibly, because of the erratic nature of disasters themselves, which we might think we're powerful here in the Senate, but we're not more powerful than God, and we're not more powerful than nature. And I'm not saying that God causes these storms, but nature has a way. We are not that powerful, and we do not know and can't predict when these will happen. All we can do is respond, and we have responded appropriately in the Senate version of this bill. Our bill will provide funding for FEMA, for the Corps of Engineers, within the budgetary control structure. It will allow us to pay for this over time in future negotiations, which is the wise thing to do. But it will not require us to use disasters, or will not force us to use disasters that occur in this country as an excuse to continue to wring out cost from health, transportation, and education. And so, Mr. President, as my colleagues know, I feel very strongly about this, and I'm proud to say that I think many, many Democrats and hopefully some Republicans feel strongly that their constituents here at home should come first, that the budget should provide for immediate response when people are victims of floods or tornadoes or hurricanes or other disasters. I think most people in the Senate understand that 2011 was a tough year. It was a historic year. But the sad thing is, I think we also understand it could repeat itself. And using these disasters when it was not the case for the war in Iraq, was not the case for the Afghan war, was not the case for Medicare, was not the case for the rebate checks, but when it comes to disasters, we can't seem to find $8.1 billion within the budget control structure. I don't, like I said, understand it. We've seen this cartoon before. I won't go into it, but I think it says beautifully why this is the wrong approach. And again, these pictures speak 1,000 words. This is what disaster looks like. I wish I had something to show what it feels like to lose everything. And then when you have lost everything, trying to provide confidence to your own family, to your own children, and to your neighbors, to then listen to the debate in Congress that says we write a blank check to Iraq, a blank check to Afghanistan, a blank check here, and yet when it comes to funding for disasters, we have to have this argument. So I'm going to ask my colleagues to vote no on H.R. 94 tomorrow. In voting no, we will reject the find the offset now requirement. We will honor the agreement made between Republican and Democratic leaders back in August to include this in the Budget Control Act. We will send a powerful signal to our constituents that they come first and that disaster victims should really come first in the budget, not last, that we understand how difficult it is for them to rebuild their communities, and the federal government wants to be and will be a reliable partner that they can depend on in their time of need. And so I'm going to submit the rest of my statement for the record. I think I've outlined the strongest points. There may be another expression of a different side of this argument. I haven't really heard a good one yet, but I look forward, if any of my colleagues want to come down and take the opposite side of this argument, I am around. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here today. I'll be here tomorrow. I'll be happy to debate them on the floor on this. But as the chair of the Homeland Security Appropriations Committee, I have to take a strong stand on this because our budget is the one that basically gets called on to fund these disasters. Again, if I have to follow the requirement to fund them in the year that the money is spent, 1 year I'm going to have to come to this floor and tell everyone we're not going to have a Homeland Security bill this year because we just had a Category 5 strike Miami, and the bill is, like they said last night on the Weather Channel, it will exceed $40 billion, so I'm just going to have to give up our whole bill, and we'll have no security for the United States to pay for the disaster in 1 year. This is the chart that I wanted to show. This is how erratic funding can be. This is funding from 2003 to 2012. In 2003, we spent basically a little over $1.7 billion. Then it jumped up to a little over $6 billion. Then Katrina, Rita, and Wilma, which was in Florida, moved us all the way up to $45 billion in 2005, and then we fell back again to about $7.8 billion. I mean, you can see the erratic nature of these storms. It's impossible for us to even get a really good average. So the only thing we can do is put a baseline in our bill, and then if disaster strikes, to respond and put it in the Budget Control Act over our 302B allocations. If you don't do it that way, you're going to end up having to scramble every year to quickly calculate what the disasters were last year and jam it against some budget. It's either going to be education that gets gutted, or health that gets gutted, or agriculture that gets gutted, or Homeland Security. And I don't want to have to be the one to call the thousands of Border Patrol agents that I've helped to fund in my budget, or be able to call Senator John McCain or Senator Kyle and say, I'm sorry, we have to lay off all the Border Patrol agents along the border in Arizona for a year or two because we had a big storm in Miami and I have to send the money to Miami. Who ever heard of such a thing? That's what the Republicans in the House have sent to us. It should be rejected on its face. There is a better way, Mr. President, to move forward on this, and the way is in the Budget Control Act that our leaders wisely have already agreed to. So we'll have this vote tomorrow. Again, I think I have raised 3 excellent points about why the House approach is wrong and why our approach is correct. If someone wants to come debate it, I will be happy to maybe try to explain it a little bit more. And the final thing I'll say is on this, it makes it even more hypocritical. I can understand some of the other side. They say, well, we've got to find a way to pay for it even if we've already negotiated, et cetera. But when the other side refuses to put even a new penny on the table to help with some of these things, it really makes it even harder to achieve what we're trying to achieve. So I thank you, Mr. President. I hope that my colleagues will hear these arguments and let me know if there's anything further that we can explain on it, but I think the picture says 1,000 words. I will close with this again. No American should have to sit on their roof while the water rises and identify an offset to finance their own rescue. We are a stronger nation than that. We are a bigger nation than that, and we most certainly can provide the funding for FEMA, for the Corps of Engineers, and other funding in the way that our Budget Control Act stipulates in this budget. And I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
you.